G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to talk about a topic that is something that was raised in a comment, and that's talking about shooting with, a range of your non-dominant eye, your left eye versus right eye, left-handed, right-handed, all those sort of details. It's something, and I suppose when I was asked the question, it was not something that I have specific thoughts on, but I have some thoughts on and I have a bit of information on there. So I thought I'd go through and do that. See if I can help people with some of those decisions. I should start by saying the left hand versus right hand thing. Left-handedness, from what I've seen over the years of being on this mortal coil, is something that in some cases is held with great pride. In other cases, there's a little bit of obstinance. In other cases, there's real issues, and the whole mix of all those ingredients, good, bad, or otherwise. And it's not something that I want to tell anyone to get over it and move on or any of that sort of stuff. This is just some suggestions to try and help people make sense of what they're doing, help prioritize things that actually matter to them, and try and make us all better shooters. So I'd start with the left hand, right hand sort of thing. And in that vein, the last video I did, I actually did some left hand shooting. Put the rifle on my left side and went through that process. Something I haven't done before. I've shot a handgun with my left hand a little bit, but not with a rifle, not tried to do that, just naturally go to the way most of the rifles made and do what I naturally do. And listen, I'll just talk about left hand, right hand for the moment. Eyes are another thing, but let's talk about that for the moment. I would also qualify that I have been a mechanic for all my working life. So 40 years of working with cars and bits and pieces at least. There is probably a little bit more of my brain that is programmed to controlling my left hand because of what I've always had to do, whether that's hands stuck behind a dashboard upside down trying to use the back of your fingernails to operate a small sensitive little screw or whatever it is. The left hand, I do a lot of work with it, so maybe that makes things a little bit easier for me to adapt. But what I found was it was very much just a case of familiarity, be it on the left hand or the right hand, in prone precision rifle shooting. Now I'd qualify that what I'm talking about there is I'm not talking about a hand-eye coordination that's been learned about hitting a golf ball or catching or throwing or all those much more functional things that really take a lot of training and development to make work properly. Throwing a ball with you are going to be left or right-handed, but in something as inanimate in a lot of senses and body function controlled more than anything as precision rifle shooting, where you're talking about your trigger hand here. There's a little bit in your shoulder and how you sit your head and your neck and all that sort of stuff. There's a little bit in that sort of stuff, but the main thing, you're talking trigger hand and all the stuff that we do. It's actually to some degrees or another not a natural thing to be pulling a trigger. You've got to train yourself to do that. It's very much a training process that we all learn, and we may learn as kids and it becomes a second nature. It's still a learned thing. From what my experience with it, what I felt, the little bit I've done, and that's in, like I said, a little bit with handguns in trigger control, but more on the rifle and sitting down there and learning and trying it, it was just really a case of gaining familiarity. I suppose, and I can put that in various forms of, in some senses, you'll probably find some people with some bad habits that can correct them by going to the other side where they've got to relearn the process. But I would really put it down for, at least for most cases, for most situations, regardless of which hand you are, shooting the other side doesn't take anything more than familiarity, training yourself, getting yourself into that process and going there. So that's just one point. That doesn't mean that all you left-hand people are shooting on the wrong side by any means. It could mean the opposite. The right-hand people should shoot left. No, what it is simply saying is that's that point there at this stage. The next thing I would talk about is eyes and using eyes. And this is probably a bigger part of the conversation, but it is a very important part of the conversation. To start off with, dominant eyes and using your dominant eye to shoot. There is a place where that matters, and the likes of a handgun, the likes of open sights and that sort of stuff, then there can be things that are hard to do. When both eyes are in gear and properly in gear and you are using them to do the same job and you want one to be in front of the other, you naturally bring a handgun out, you naturally bring a rifle up, you don't want your other eye to be using that, then yes, finding your dominant eye is a very relevant thing. Of course, it's another conversation with handguns actually, and I suppose I'll go straight there, is that I am a person who found I didn't have a strong dominant eye. I could, when I first started to do the handgun thing, is where I really started to figure that out and actually do the tests, I would find that it was more in my mind control than it was in my pre-programmed stuff. I could actually make either eye pick up what image I was seeing. Which worked very well for me, because as I got older I found that my eyes are being a little peculiar, and my right eye is a lot more short focused, my left eye is a lot more long focused. So that meant that I used to shoot a handgun using my right eye. I then found I was struggling to pick up the target with my right eye, and I had to change over to my left eye. So that's what I've done. Basically change a slight move in my gun position, nothing else changed, and it did that. But that's what I've been through. And I would say with a rifle scope, as a rule, for our ELR shooting, I'm using both eyes for everything but shooting. Shooting, my left eye can tell me nothing. I can't see anything. I can't pick up wind. I can't pick up anything out there because it's too far away. I'm shooting 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 yards, and my good long focus eye, I still can't see anything out there. It's too far away. So I'm doing everything through the scope. So whether you have that open or closed, it doesn't really matter. Scope is where all the focus is. For people who are target shooting, and that's including F-class to the Palmer to 22s to whatever it is, the proper way to do that, well, I should say, once you've got wind flags in gear, and they are wind flags you can see with your naked eye, then the proper way to train to do that is to have your other eye, one eye on your target and being able to do that, your other eye looking at your range flags, so you can see your wind flags and see where they're going. And in truth, in anything that you can see, so whether that's you're shooting 300 yards and you want to see other stuff, then having two eyes engaged for that job, where you can actually check that stuff at the last moment and then shoot, means both eyes should be engaged. In a lot of cases, you'll find that it can be more convenient to have the dominant eye not on the scope in that situation, because it's easier to use your scope eye, because there your picture's nice and it's all there, so it's easier to switch the brain over and study on that, and the dominant eye is more able to go out and check other things. Obviously you can't do two things together, but you can do with no movement. I use both eyes. My other eye is always doing all the other checking and bits and pieces around that, so I definitely disengage from the scope a lot. But when I shoot, and as I said, for any real long range, extended long range, extreme long range, ultra long range, then my scope eye is the only one that can see anything. So the other question that we get, and this moves into, okay, it's not so much a dominant eye, it's a good eye and a bad eye. So this eye needs is for someone who has clearer vision because they have more impairment, the lens is more damaged, or as they get older, eyes do weird things like myself. Then you find that I want to have my good eye on the scope. My question is, if you've really got a bad eye where the eye doesn't work anymore, it simply cannot get clear vision, okay, that's another scenario. You have to use your other eye. That's sort of done. And then to change over to your eye and use the rifle on the other side of things, like I said, not much more than programming. Might be more awkward for some people than other people, but it's programming, training. Lay down there, do the work in the night time in the house, that sort of stuff. Get yourself familiar with it, start to make it feel comfortable, and you'll find all the rest of what you already know works perfectly in that same format. but it is, like I said, can be a good opportunity to relearn some stuff and to go through the process and maybe even make a better shooter of yourself. But that is done. If it's a case of just your focus length, so as I presume most people are aware, as we get older, our lenses in our eyes, which are the same as any lens, they're a convex piece of glass that for our eyes it changes shape by the muscles. It actually moves in and out to give us our different focus. As we get older, that lens gets harder and the muscles get weaker. It's the reason why you'll find that when you're tired or you're sick, you'll have poorer vision. It's because you have less energy, less strength in those muscles, and that more rigid lens doesn't want to adjust as much, and so it's harder to see. So in the early mornings, in the late nights, when you haven't got full energy, when you're sick, whatever, you're losing focus. That's because that lens isn't moving as much. But a scope has focus on it. Now, don't confuse parallax, or what some people would refer to as the side focus knob, as focus, because you have either fast focused or main focus on the back of the scopes. Here's a couple of scopes, a couple that I have in the cupboard. This is the Valdata scope. It has on the back here its focus knob, which is this last knob on the back here, and which is how you're focusing it, and you should be doing that. There's videos on that, but you should be doing that on to focus, get perfect focus on the reticle, and then your side focus happens where your parallax is to be adjusted to get it onto target. I'll go through a bit more of that in a second, but I'll show you this one here, which is Night Force. It has this knob here that I'll just undo that you undo. That's a lock nut, and this whole the whole what is it? The lens cover, or the whole end of the scope rotates to focus it, and then you lock it back up. I'll put it back to where it was to set your focus on that there. And there are various ones, whether they have fast focus knobs, some have fast focus knobs and main focus points, but essentially you're adjusting the length of that lens, which gives it the focus to suit your eye. So if you're in a situation where your eye has changed and you found the other eye works and your main eye doesn't, focus can fix that. I should do a little segue at this point. I mentioned about the side parallax. This has the parallax adjustment on the side of it, same as the Valdata, which, yes, it does focus things as well, but it's not its job. And it's one of the things that actually one of the keys to some problems that people have shooting wise is that if they either go to, in some scopes, not the Night Force, but in some scopes they'll have the measurement, they'll have meters written on the side of the scope. I don't really prefer that, but they'll have the distance on the side of the scope. So if you're shooting at 600, you put it at 600 supposedly, or in theory, to shoot at that range, and that will get your parallax correct, and that should be the focus correct as well. The truth of it is, the parallax, both those things don't necessarily work perfectly. Yes, you do want it focused, and I've heard people train people to definitely adjust that while you're looking through the scope. So you get your side parallax and adjust it while you're looking through the scope. I completely agree with that, but there's another feature you should be doing. You don't set parallax just by focus. If you do it properly, you should get it focused, and then you should move your head around. Make sure you move your eye around and make sure that the crosshairs stay fixed on target. If you move your eye around, and this is only really done in a properly set up rifle, so on a bag base the whole rifle is rigid and solid and you are not touching it, and you move your eye around, which can be hard for people who have set up a very firm cheek weld to try and do that, because when they're moving their eye around, they're shaking the whole rifle, which then doesn't work so well. But you should be getting to where you're not moving your eye around, not moving the rifle around. You are moving your eyeball around to different points on behind the scope, and that crosshair does not move on the target. Then your parallax is correct. if you don't do that, you can be getting spread groups because you have incorrect parallax. With the perfect cheek weld, the perfect positions, okay, you can still pull it off, but and using your scope shadow and centering it and that sort of stuff, there's different things you can do to get around it. But to truly set parallax, you should be moving your eye around around the scope picture at the back and making sure that your reticle is staying on it. And like I said, focus in really good scopes it will work as well, but focus isn't it. I have certainly seen many scopes. Most scopes you can get a little variance where you have good focus, and you will still find you've got the reticle moving, so you actually move it till that reticle stops. And in a lot of scopes, you'll get a tiny bit out of your focus point to get where your parallax is perfect. It's once you focus on it again, concentrate with your eye, you'll bring all the focus back in. But like I said, parallax and focus are not the same thing. Okay, back to the conversation I'm talking about. You can actually adjust your scope to use your eye. So essentially, if it's just a focus thing, this eye sees better, try that. Doesn't work in all situations, but try resetting your scope up to suit. So that's talking about eyes, and like I said, it's not necessarily I have a left dominant eye, so I've got to shoot left-handed. No, that's not it. It can cause things. There's other features you can take you there, but that isn't necessarily where I'd go. Okay, so the next bit that I'd go into, and I suppose the key of what I'm talking about here is there is nothing wrong shooting left-handed at all. You know, really, where if it's where everything works the absolute best, it's where you find the absolute comfort. And keep in mind, there's a bit more to this conversation, but where everything absolutely works the best, then totally, it's the best way for you to do it. But you've just made a bit of a rod for your back. Being a left-hand shooter, and ask any left-hand shooter what they think of this, and they'll tell you the weld's done a little bit wrong because you can't get enough stuff for left-handers. And they're right, that you can't get enough stuff for left-handers. Generally you can get around it, but if you have gone down the road of deciding, yes, this is definitely have to do it, then you also have found yourself in the place where there's less actions, there's less rifles, there's there's quite a big deal with chassis or with stocks or with, like I said, actions or bits and pieces in getting left-handed. It's also, there's a big deal with the stuff that you can buy that suits you. You know, we have really good deals that come up. You become into a more select range of the equipment. Listen, which for some people is going to suit them perfectly. They love that. It's all special. They can only get it because it is left-handed, and in some cases if something comes up left-handed, they want to get it because it's left-handed. It's just like them, so it suits them. So nothing wrong with that approach. But if you're in the position of making that decision, of going through this process and starting off of where I've got to be, keep in mind it's one of the things that should rate as a priority. Not the only priority by any means, but the products that you're going to be able to use. And I suppose, what am I saying? If you're a left-hander, you play baseball with your left hand, you play cricket with your left hand, you play footy with your left foot, you're a left-hander. A Molly Duker, we used to call them over here, but basically you're a left-hander. So that's how you are. That's fine, but you might not have to be a left-handed precision rifle shooter. You might find that you can get quite comfortable shooting on the other side. Now, that might not suit your sensibility, but what I'm actually talking about is your choices, both the amount of money you're going to spend and the choices you're going to have offered to you are going to be very much attached to that decision. So I know for some people it's not a decision, but to me there is some things to get around that. So let's go through some of those things that you can deal with. As alluded to, training. Training, familiarity is a key feature, both in training eyes, and I'll go through that. A couple of things I want to go through on the eye front. In listening to target shooters, or people who train people in target shooting, they tend to, the dominant eye is not the feature they're looking for. They're trying to train both eyes to do their job, because both eyes have equally important jobs. And like I said, in talking about looking at range flags, which also can come into tactical situations, having both eyes on the job even though using a scope. As said, to the honest degree, you're not going to be able to focus on two different focuses and make the brain do that, although you can do that in a peripheral sense. Being able to switch from those two jobs without having to do anything else, take this eye's reading, that eye's reading, and make sense of it all takes training. One of the things that I was told they do is to start people off on that sort of job is to get people standing up behind a spotting scope and get someone behind them to use a pair of hands in front of their eyes and to move them from this eye, there we go, from this eye to this eye, so it covers it, side to side, and get people to switch to start to use their brains. So that this eye goes through a spotting scope, this eye looks down range, and simply without touching them, without influencing, take one vision away, put one vision back, and get them to start to use the brain that way. It's really a mental process to get to do that side of things, but it's actually training to be able to start your brain to use both eyes and separate the two things to where you can actually still use them, still have them open, but see more things. But it's a familiarity thing. The other thing on the eye subject I want to touch on is people talk about using reading glasses. When it comes to glasses, reading glasses, all forms of optical enhancement glasses, they're made out of a lens, which is the same thing as we're talking about as what's in the eye. It's a convex piece of glass that has different shapes to it depending on what you need adjusted in the light coming into your eyes. And the way that's ground is out of a lens, which is a round piece of glass, which is the convex, and then the frame shape is cut out of that glass with the center in it made for how you're reading, or for how you're using them. What happens to correct that, to make that work for looking through a rifle scope where you're looking actually sideways, through the top corner of the frame there, is you can actually get that optical center moved over to that spot. So they take that same piece of glass that suits your eye for that vision, and with our optical center in the middle, and they simply move it to where that optical center is where you're looking through for your scope eye. And I presume there's various forms of where they go beyond that point. I'm no expert, but I can imagine you'd set up your scope eye with the optical center there, and you'd set up probably a different lens for your off-scope eye to do whatever else you're doing, whether that's writing or that's looking at your stuff here, or it's looking at your range flags, or whatever it is. You can set up the glasses so they are specifically shooting glasses. Something that I'm certain that most people who use glass all the time would do that, but for people getting into it, understand that although you can still use your normal stuff, they are a little bit compromised because of exactly what we just spoke about there. Anyway, that's glasses. I won't go any more. Like I said, not an expert. I've got away with 55 years of my life without using them. In the last couple of years, I've started to use them, so no expert. Anyway, in the general topic about things, the whole lens thing, the whole vision thing, like I said, keep in mind there's adjustment on your scope, whichever form there is to focus it to suit your eye. Your side focus is in all scopes I'm talking about at least, is parallax, and parallax is not necessarily focus. There are probably as many good shooters that have problems and issues, or people who are doing everything else right that are having issues that are attached to not understanding your parallax and not using the parallax properly. Making sure you're moving your head around to make sure that parallax is set properly, and they understand that focus and parallax are not the same thing. That's a very important detail. And certainly for the people who just dial in a number and then look through it and use a scope like that, no. That's not. I prefer not to have a number on the side of your parallax knob. I'd prefer for you adjust it, use the focus point where it starts to look clear as your starting point, and then you adjust fine by actually moving your head around, making sure your rifle's not moving. There's no point in doing it. If you have physical contact with your rifle, you cannot do that test properly, because it means that it has to move. That rifle needs to be planted, the scope needs to be dead still, your eye dances around, and make sure that your reticle stays still on that target. Then you have correctly set your parallax. So that's that side of things with the scope side of it. As I've said, beyond that point, And I suppose I don't want to pick on the left-handers at all. I don't want to say that you shouldn't be shooting there, because of course for some people it's how they do it. There's I've no doubt that some of the best shooters in the world are left-handed. So my main thing is to try and give people and to try and make sure they prioritise things properly. You are, as any left-hander will tell you, you are taking on some challenges in what you can get and how equipment works for you by making that choice. And I suppose what I'm trying to offer is there may be another choice. It's not going to suit all people, but there may be another choice. There is certainly a logical reason as to why to be able to be comfortable in a right-hand rifle, and using your right eye and shooting in a right-hand format. If nothing else, you want to shoot a mate's rifle, he's more than likely got a right-hand rifle, let alone what you can buy and what you can get and what you can buy for. Once again, I want to take nothing away from the guys that do the other side. In some places there's some beautiful rifles that are built left-hand side of things. Just keep in mind, if nothing else, the financial sense, there are some things that you're taking on that aren't quite as easy for you. Anyway, I hope that makes some sense for the commenter and what I found out of that. Like I said, neither of us have really had much to do with it. That trying to shoot and actually going out and doing the shoot to actually see what that was like, listen, it worked. I found I was becoming familiar very quickly. And it was fairly awkward conditions. We had quite erratic wind. Right. It was freezing. It was a mirage because we had warm sun with 0 to 5 degree wind coming across it. It wasn't a temperature, or I shouldn't say it was a temperature. It wasn't a heat mirage that you're looking at there. That was very ice cold wind over the bright sun, which warms the ground a little bit. That was the temperature difference that caused that mirage. But sitting up on the hill there, from runny noses to just simply becoming frozen, and I'd get for the people in the North America or in the further extremities, 0 degrees for you guys is nothing. For us in West Australia, it's cold. So we're cold, especially as we're getting into that season, not acclimatised to it. So it was, I'm not trying to whinge, what I'm trying to say is it was quite unfamiliar or uncomfortable conditions to be shooting in, to go to the left-hand side of things. And from what I found, the very fast gaining of familiarity, only a few shots into it was starting to make sense. Apart from a troublesome trigger finger that didn't know the proper manners of shooting, the actual trigger pull, that side of things, I found was growing. I got my grip to where I started to get onto the proper point on my pad. Certainly the squeeze, that sort of stuff, that seemed to work programmed in my head normally. I didn't have any issues there. I wasn't having to think about it. That was happening in normal sort of automatic control. And like I said, that maybe 30 odd years of being a mechanic and using my hand backwards, upside down, in the middle of my back type thing. But I still found it was able to be learned, and I wouldn't think it would be a monstrous thing to be able to become familiar. The last bit that I would say in that bracket is, and part of my thought process here was, when you go through what it takes to deal with shooting on the other side, on your wrong side, doesn't make either one of those left or right, but on what's not comfortable to you, I'd have to say, to be honest with you, we as be us left-handed or right-handed in largely perfectly healthy bodies, to get too whingy and whiny about things or take on awkward situations because we feel we need to, should probably take a leaf out of the book of some of the amputees and people with far greater problems than ours that still can do this job very proficiently and better than most of us in some cases. There's guys, I've seen a few times people with no legs, with no arms shooting with rifles. There's from all sorts of problems, guys that shoot with pacemakers that their heart's pounding away without their control, trying to shoot and trying to deal with those sort of problems, to guys who with shoulder damage, to eye damage, to all sorts of things, when you have to, because your body's decided it can't do this, or circumstances have changed to where you have to change, you can still be a very proficient shooter. So in perfectly healthy form, to get too weird about it, we haven't got much to complain about. Anyway, Enough of me ranting and raving and preaching. Not trying to do that at all. Very much trying to offer people perspective and to try and help people prioritise things to hopefully make them better shooters and maybe make it a bit easier for them. But anyway, each to our own. Thank you very much for checking in on us, and we'll catch you next time.
Hi guys, Sam here. For folks that are interested in our products that you will have seen in our videos, these are all products that Mark has designed through our experience in ELR shooting. We manufacture them here ourselves, the likes of our adjustable bag bases, bag riders, bipod systems, muzzle brakes, shot data recording sets, and even our great fun little 22 long rifle target. These are all available in our web store, the links to which are below this video, along with our contact information. And guys, we work hard at putting these videos together, so we appreciate all the help we can get. For those of you who haven't subscribed, don't forget and hit the bell so you get notifications of when our videos come out. It would be awesome to get some financial support. So for those of you who can, you can purchase support bits on our web store, which help us bring these videos to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.